My name is Gus. I would like to tell you about Janet Klees. Janet lives in Canada. Her work is very important. It is based on as a way. She's helped people with disability to get the good things in life. Janet believes that it's important to build strong communities that welcome everyone. Janet is very good at teaching the best way to support people with disability. Last time, Janet spoke about building a powerhouse, teams and families, and this support. Her, her presentation today is called Towards Magazines, the issues of the powerhouse. And I hope you enjoy listening to Janet.
Oh, thank you, Gus. It's just so lovely to be welcomed by now a familiar face since you did my introduction the other day as well. This is just lovely. It's just really wonderful to be here. I want to start by saying that I'm speaking from the territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, and I acknowledge their stewardship of this land over many thousands of years. We are bound together by a treaty in this part of Canada that settlers actually have not honored well. And it's time that we start to rebalance this relationship in order to move forward in the future together and stronger. I want to just do a quick thank you to the organizers and thank you to returning participants. I've tried to put together a presentation that had some, follow through from the one I did the other day on building a powerhouse team, but I wanted to do something that would be a more practical, that we'd have some chance to work at a few things. But even more importantly, I'm hoping I can leave you with lots and lots of practical ideas that you can take home and try out with your team and see what effect that might have. Um, First of all, let me just move forward in that's for my land acknowledgement. I always like to kind of touch on where my ideas kind of come from or what the underlying values and beliefs are really quickly. This time around, I'll just say that this work and this thinking and the outcomes of all of this would not be possible if there wasn't an underlying value and a belief in the worth of each and every person. And what that means is when people aren't present, when they're left to the margins, we are not able to experience their contributions, and our society is less without everyone. Secondly, we believe in the capacity of family, as I've worked for families for so long, that this just is a very, very strong belief. Families don't need to be alone. They don't need to be able to do everything, but the leadership among family members of all kinds is immense and impactful. We need to be able to look at our communities and see the abundance and the possibility within, and that sometimes can be a challenge if we're not used to doing that. Once you get started on it, it's really clear and powerful. And then in this chaotic time, we really need to have a principled approach that kind of sets the vision and then gives us lots of opportunity to check whether we're on a pathway to actually achieving the vision, that good life in that vision, or are we wasting our time on something else altogether? For me, that's greatly influenced by the framework of social role valorization. And so all of this comes down to, I always start with the gifts and the contributions and the possibilities of the person, thinking that they're living within an abundant community, even if it's not yet discovered. And And always safeguarding, because often the people we're talking about are either on the margins or at risk of being put to the margins of our society. So we need to continually to safeguard for the benefit of everyone. So those are just some really basic ideas that I think are really important in this work. For today's presentation, I'm going to do a little bit of overlap of some very basic concepts from what I had done with building the powerhouse team. But I'm going to just see if I can give you a little bit more to take home and work with, rather than big ideas, some practical things. Some of the answers of the how, if we've got the why, as Anne just mentioned in a previous session, if we've got the why kind of solid in our heads, and that's around the vision. Some of maybe what I will talk about in the next hour or so is how to get started, how to figure it out, how to work things through. What are some lessons learned from many families who have gone before? One of the questions people often say to me is, how do you find people to be on this team? And I just really want to say that a powerhouse team is not found or recruited, but it's shaped, inspired, and guided by an ever-evolving process. If you start working at your team, it starts to move backwards. So we really need to keep that in mind. And, the things that we have to come back to again and again and again is vision, understanding that unique support role, having some effective strategies to implement our ideas, and vigilance to make sure that we're on the path. And we need to do that again and again. So I'm going to today touch on many of these themes, and what I've written up here. I'm not going to go over it, but really, sharing that vision for a powerhouse start, building excitement for the essential role of support, strategies that are really powerful for the team, a vigilant mindset. But in all of those, that getting started piece in the middle is my promise to you that I will try to make this, practical, that you can walk away with some ideas. So one of the things that people ask from time to time, who's this team you're talking about? But I don't have a team. Do I wait till I've got a team of 4 or 5 people, and then, I can look at this material and have it make sense? And I think teams are ever changing and start at all kinds of levels. If you are a family member of a person with a disability that you're wanting to move in this direction, you're at the very least the beginning team, and it's worthwhile getting this information good and early. So at least it's always at least this one person with a disability plus one family member, ally, or committed non-paid person in their life. Perhaps this person has several family members who are interested in their life journey, and then the team's just that much bigger. Often the person and the family also has some paid support. It could be as little as, we've got some marvelous stuff happening with 4 or 5 hours a week, or it might be significantly more. And sometimes we're working toward the person plus the family plus the paid support, and then a growing number of friends and allies. And if you're already there, then you can really embrace larger parts of this information. But I just wanted to make sure that you can get it started no matter how small you are in terms of team. And so let's start with the vision then. And this is foundational. This is the guiding light, the thing that you are going to keep going back to again and again. And you'll see what I mean. It's really important to start off with an idea of vision that would be just as comfortable for you to wear as it would be for your son or daughter. So if we want a good, typical life in community, we have to make sure that it is a typical life. It's one that you and I would embrace. And this slide has some of the things that most of us feel very strongly about, that we want to be part and a contributing part of a natural community where we are valued and we are respected, whether for our differences or for the things that we have in common with other people, where our contributions are sought out and valued by others, and where the things that we want to have in our lives, there's a range of ways to get them done, but not in weird kind of ways, but the ways that everyone values and enjoys. And so it's really important to start with a vision that could be embraced by everyone. And We all think in different ways, sometimes in these big, lofty ways, but in essence, that vision is built out of people coming together again and again and again and making these kinds of lists for the good things in life. And these are the things that we all want in our lives in one way and another. How they come to us, how we're satisfied with receiving them or shaping them is different from person to person. But these are the things that we want and need. And so those are the things that we would assume and we would work with our loved ones with disability would also want and need in their lives. Same list. There isn't a special list for special people. We all want, need, and deserve to have and thrive best in the same kind of environment. And so what's really important is that sometimes people look at these vision statements and whatnot, and they think, oh my goodness, I have no idea how I'm going to do that. And that's why with the vision, what you're really trying to call people to is that that this is something that's wanted, desired, you'd like to work toward that, even if at the very beginning you don't know how you're going to get there. So we say it's quite aspirational, and that's okay. You don't have to figure out the how. Right now you're building the momentum for that good life, and that's what your family member, yourself, and eventually this team, whatever it is comprised of, needs to kind of embrace altogether. This will guide us on our journey. And most importantly, equally importantly, is the fact that we want this because when people aren't present in these ways in and among the rest of our community will not work as well. It will be missing something that it may not even know. And so that's the other why that's really important. And then, so this is what we want for all people's lives. This is another way to condense that list. Everyone wants genuine purpose, positive identity, a chance to contribute, authentic relationship, welcome, and real belonging. And this is so far from the reality, the honest reality of so many people's lives, people with disability. And the fact is, it needn't be. We know how to make this happen, and we have to start gathering together what we know and applying. I have kind of looked at a couple of the conference sessions, and I know that lots of people are starting to know this and giving us stories that we can be totally thrilled by. So good news on the horizon, or we're in the middle of good news and good stories that we can follow. I want to emphasize that the heart of what we want and need always is relationship. It's for you, for me, our families, members with disabilities are no exception. And it's really vital to all of our lives, because relationship in our lives is what enriches our lives, what brings us opportunities we didn't even know that we're looking for, stretching us in new ways, demanding sometimes contributions we didn't have within us. And we are better in relationship. We may differ on the number of relationships and the kinds of relationships we want, but we all benefit so much. And people with disabilities in particular need the additional safeguarding aspect of relationship. And relationship does safeguard anyways. We look out for each other, the people we care about. This needs to be intentionally and solidly built for people with disabilities in many, many layers. So if something happens to some people, other people are around. And this is a good time for me to talk about, I talk a lot about people's desire and need and interest in developing relationship with people who don't have a disability. I don't want people to mistake that for not valuing relationship between people with disability or people in general. It's just that what I hear from individuals and from families is it's the relationships with family members out in our community, same age peers, people who will grow through life with the individual, that's hugely missing from people's lives. And that's why I think it needs some front and center attention at all times. And you'll hear me talk about this a lot. And that's only because I'm in and among families who say this is important. Now, in order to get practical, when you see that little red running shoe up there, this is me trying to help you say, okay, that's great theory. Here's some practical things to think about. It's really helpful for all kinds of people if you think about vision and you break it down a little bit into the various parts of life, the different realms or the different domains or the different life areas such as home, work, recreation and leisure, family, friends. The list we have here, there would be other categories that people would put down. These seem to be many of the main ones. Ones that's important for you might well be missing. What I've done is I've drawn out two of them so that you can have a sense of what I mean. So you might say for this person, what she's told me is really important is having a home that's a really safe place where she won't be afraid to be on her own a little bit, but she definitely wants a home of her own. She wants to be queen of her castle. She wants to be in charge of and control of her space, including who comes to live with her. And she'd like people to live with her who, she can learn from, where there's some real mutual relationship and maybe one or two of the same interests. So they actually share in their life a little bit. Those kinds of things are vision kinds of statements. It could be brought about in a person's life in several different ways. So this isn't a goal with a very strong, concrete boundaries, but it's really visionary, right? And then another example might be the civic realm of one's life. So your vision might be that this is a person who really loves being a citizen of Australia or Canada or whatever, and really interested in the politics and voting, and that could lead to many different things, including being involved in campaigns and that kind of thing. But also really wants to give back in some way, wants to be a good citizen of this country. And it might be in an environmental way, or it might be in a fundraising kind of way. There's lots of different places to go. So you see both of those boxes say two roles. And what that does is it says, over a lifetime, people might explore home that has all of those elements, but it might be in one way this time and another way another time, the same with the civic areas of life. And so this is just a really helpful way for particularly paid support people on the team, and I'll come to kind of breaking that down in a minute, but how they can kind of grasp it when it sounds to some people, if you just keep it at that higher level, a little bit unattainable. They're not quite sure what your words mean or what they're supposed to be focusing on. So kind of looking at vision in this way is really, really helpful. So this is a moment maybe you get to look at the ideas tab on your Slido box, and just let me know, what are 3 life areas that would be the most important for you to begin to describe and address right now? And some things, they can be from the previous list I just showed, but to really think this through, are there 3 life areas that you are pretty convinced are the most important? Would your son, daughter, or family member that you're planning with be in agreement, or would they have a slightly different 3 that they would focus on? What about longer term people in the person's life? Often people who are a little back are really interested in the longer term future and seeing what stability would look like then. What about age peers of this person, young people that they know? Would those 3 areas be kind of more or less the same or very different? And then it's a great opportunity to kind of look at the longer list with some of your paid support members and ask what they're kind of interested in right now. Okay, so any thoughts and ideas? Friends, home, employment. Yes, absolutely. And so many people, we're talking about people in the beginning of their adult life and into their middle years only. And there's so many things to be nailed down at that point in your life. So it's really important to kind of look at which 3 areas. I know that sometimes we might do something kind of longer term and more solid and sustaining, and that would be something like a home of your own. And then another one that might focus on that leisure, recreation, passion and interests category, because home is a long-term goal for people in terms of sometimes home ownership or real stability of home, or your home after you've tried out a few times of flatting or whatever. But along the way, what keeps us interested in life are our passions and interests. Hobbies, work, and home. Yes, so someone else has got hobbies down. Work, home, romantic relationships. Absolutely. Who am I going to live with for the rest of my life? Sometimes we find a roommate like that, but most often those are our more intimate partners or romantic partners that we get to see beyond their warts in a whole different way, right? Okay, I'm going to move on because time is so short, and um, you can imagine there's just so much to say here. The next thing I want to do around vision that's a little bit practical is just talk about some real basics around bringing the team on board for vision. So you've got some new people. They might be young adults themselves. They might never have thought of vision for their own life in a conscious kind of way, but it's typically there for lots of people. So I would say, first of all, just keep it simple. Talk about these life areas, make it concrete, figure out where there's priority and agreement, right? So if work is something that sounds pretty clear to them that someone who's 22 or 23 would want to work on, agree on that. Do something like figuring out the top 3 areas. So they're not looking at 12 to 15 life areas and expecting to achieve what by when, right? This is incremental. These are the main things. This one's going to take slowly over time. And this one we can get onto pretty quickly once we narrow down which interest we're going to follow. I think it's really, really important to make it personal. So this is a conversation rather than, you telling the person about the vision. This is, sit down and tell me about your own life. When you look at this list of what's important in people's lives, what would you, as a team, what would we categorize as most important, and what's the order for us? And what are your own thoughts about home right now and relationship and satisfying work? And people will answer to different degrees, but particularly if you have people in the same lifespan as your sons and daughters, you're going to get people who will begin to link. And that's the third thing that I'm saying there. You want these young people to identify that, hey, actually, it's not so different. So I'm just getting to know this guy. There's so much about him that seems different to me. Wow, here's some pretty important things that are the same. And one of the biggest things you're always looking for is for your paid support members on your team to really identify at a personal level with the person they're supporting, and then ensure them, yep, the list is long, or the goals are high, or the vision is high, but we're going to do this together. We're going to learn together. We're pretty clear on the why. The how, that woman Janet or some other people have some strategies, but we're going to actually have to work them out together and see what they really mean. So this is just some practical ways to deal with the vision piece. Right. The second area that we're going to look at is, building some excitement for the essential role of supporter. So the role of support is usually left unclear, and it's up to each family or supporter to address. Lots of families don't think in terms of role very clearly and said, look, you've come on, you're supposed to do this, 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 and this, a whole bunch of duties, times that you're supposed to be there, things that you're supposed to do, but we're not putting it together for people in terms of role. And when we identify in terms of role, we're actually giving people lots more information so that they can begin to make decisions to do something or not to do something from that kind of language. And so it's quite muddy. One of the wonderful things to do, and we did it with the group the other day, was to have people do a little brainstorm on your team about, the support role is, or the support role is not, and helping people to be really, really clear on what for you belongs in that not box and what for you belongs in the is box, and where they might be the same or differ. And so often we did this with a group not long ago, and they came up with this kind of list, right? That says, the paid support person, the paid support person is not a paid friend, is not the boss, is not the one in control, is not the babysitter. Really, it's the guide, the low profile facilitator, the backup, the toolkit builder, those kinds of things. And in that conversation already, if they've seen what are the green light kinds of things, they'll get a more and more clear idea of what it is that you have in mind. So a powerful kind of exercise. I'm always looking for words for one side of it or other. So if you have a moment to pop into the box for me, and I can't read as quickly as I want as people go through, but that's fine. Where's my, um, but I just love it when I get a new word or two. A few years ago, someone said a tourist guide. I love that one. Okay. And so, um, for me, even though there's lots of different roles that come up on that Jamboard, that flip chart around what a supporter is, lots of roles to describe it. For me, there's one way of describing this role that supersedes all others, and the others are supporting roles toward this, and that is that the essential support role is being a bridge to relationship and connection in community. And so what that means is that it instead of being the relationship itself, the be all and end all for the person, they really are this conduit, this bridge into all kinds of possibility, particularly in the realm of connecting with community in a certain way, and especially around relationship. So it's a great role to keep relationship at front and center in all of the work that the person does. It's a really unique role, and I think one of the things is in the absence of anything else, people aren't sure if the role is valued, if it's essential, or if it's just something you've got some money to put toward, right? Or is it kind of really fancy babysitting, And so I think by being very serious about naming the role and understanding the value of the role, that people embrace it more clearly. So it's unique. No one else can quite take on this role. I'll explain that in a moment. And also, I think the very fact that there's a paycheck carves out time in the paid supporter's role to do things reliably and well in a person's life that other people don't have. So there's something very important to that, even essential. If you don't do it, it will not get done. What is key to point out really early on in this is really a role that is a bridge to relationship. It's not the relationship itself. And for many people, they get unsure about what the role might be that they're expected to take on. And so the word friend is your most reliable thing to reach for. And I'm very, very clear that the role of the paid support is not the friend, especially while they're being paid to do the job. The job is bridge. And here's one of my thought processes around that. One is, if the paid supporter thinks that they're the friend, the motivation to get out there and look for friends for that person is hugely reduced. The person with a disability themselves sees the person as a friend, gloms onto the person, loves being with them because they've spent some time together. They're reliable, they're charming, they're caring. Why wouldn't they feel like they're their friend? And they're not that interested in letting go and being with other people where it might be a little bit tricky, a little bit less certain. Families who are often quite tired and uncertain about things are so happy for a short period of time that their son or daughter is happy and sees this person as a friend that they just go along with it, that they're the friend. And the support person themselves loses the edge or the desire to understand that this is really key, because they really do care for this person a lot. And in their presence, they feel that the person is gaining a lot. And so all that, the edge is taken off around that desire to look for friends around. And so it's really important, I think, that we really need to focus on that's not your role right now. There's a time in the future you might leave that paid role and come back as friend, and families are often holding hope that happens. And but it's better not to promise, because you don't know what the future brings. And 95% of paid support people need to go on to take another job that doesn't allow this kind of time and commitment to continue. And the other thing, it's not a real definition of friend as we know it, right? There's a degree of pay that is involved in all of our friendships. And what that means is that it is out of control of the person when that paid supporter leaves or not. So all of this is in saying that that essential role is a role of being bridge, which means you're not the friend, but you are an essential part of the present, a valued part of this team. There's an absolute role for you. You're really essential in making a big difference to people in their lives in lots of different ways, in having some new identities, making contributions, having roles that people relate to and understand. And so there's a really big role to take on. Can't really take it on if you're going to be the friend at the same time. It really messes things up. And one of the things the bridge does is, holds a belief in possibility when others can't see it, maybe from that vantage point of the high point of the bridge. And you're really got this unique role of understanding both the person that you're supporting and the new person in community. And you can kind of play a bridging role until they spend some time together. Another thing I think it's really, really clear that we have to make clear to paid support people, it's not a shortcoming in a supporter if they don't become the friend, right? Providing not good support and not leaving behind a scaffolding of various relationships in various degrees, that's a failure to work with someone for 2-3 years and not one relationship is in your wake. That's what I would worry about way more than it's not a shortcoming if your life is taking a different direction. Just quickly to say that there's all kinds of support tasks that still can fit the bridge. If relationship is what it's all about, all the people doing lots of the personal care support and some of the meal prep and whatnot, you're preparing people physically, emotionally, mentally for their days so that they're at their best self. That's really, really important work that contributes to the person being able to, take advantage of this bridging kind of role. And so is getting to know someone so that you can hear and augment their voice. All of the work in role development, that's all part of being a really, really effective bridge. So don't worry if your hours are 7 to 9 every day in the morning, that you're not, that bridge role is not for you. It very much is. Just a couple of thoughts around barriers to being a bridge. And this is just very concrete ways that you can highlight to people, or you can, as families, look around and see what you say happening. If most of the time is spent in a one-to-one support relationships, supported situations, that's a barrier, not a bridge. There's no third person in that conversation, in that situation. You're a barrier when you just pass through community. You're entertaining rather than building roles where people can engage with others, right? So it's just flipping around, and the only relationship that's consistent or interesting is the one with the paid support. That's a barrier. If you're being an expert, so people think that they can't come near because they don't have your expertise, or being the center of attention rather than the person themselves when they know your name and not the person you're coming in with, that's a barrier. When you focus on your own interests and drag the person around to all these things, and he's keen to be with you, he really likes you, but it's not really seeing, noticing, and developing his interests. When the person isn't understandable in terms of behavior or language, and you don't provide a really positive interpretation of what the person is saying or doing, that's a barrier, because that person then remains unknowable to the third or fourth person who sees them. And if you can't get comfortable, find a way to be a chatty, asking people questions and drawing people in, and say, sorry, that's just not my personality. I'm a one-on-one guy. You're being a barrier rather than a bridge. And as I said, when you see yourself as the friend. So it's just very concrete ways to help people clarify this role. That being said, I think it's really important that we need to continue to value the people that come in support roles to your team. And one of the ways that I've thought is always helpful to do that is to be really clear, what do paid supporters bring to the team, even when they don't, there's some things missing. So there's what they need to learn, but what do they bring? What is it that people can pop into the ideas tab for me that people can bring to this role? And some of the things that I think about right off the top is new people almost always bring some new degree of energy, some fresh eyes. Also, they can bring different life experiences, different approaches. Maybe they're particularly interested in art or music or physics. Maybe they're a super curious kind of person. Maybe a number of people that I know, after a few weeks of being very, very tentative, actually are so pleased that they delight in the person, right? And so there's the new joy and delight at the person that they bring. What other ideas do people have? What are they bringing into the relationship? My energy, patience, new ways of relating, absolutely. New ways of describing things and getting things done, new ways of teaching. And, we know when it works because that new strategy stays in place person after person. And what about what do they need to learn? The other thing I think that young people bring, which is really, or not only young people, but new people bring on, when they get the vision that it's the same vision for everyone, and yet because of devaluation and because of, oh, that's good enough for him thinking of our society, that the gap from that vision being in place in people's lives is greater for another person simply because of their disability. Lots of people find this social justice kind of blood that runs through their veins, and they can bring that in a way. Family members have lived with this forever, but for lots of supporters, they come with this righteous justice mentality. That's really, really wonderful. Needs to be in terms of what they need to learn. They might need to temper that a bit. Might need to kind of have some help seeing how things are working through there. But that's a really a big asset that they have. Interest, skills, absolutely. A sense of fun, willing to connect and listen to the person. Yeah, those are supporters using their time well. New strategies if it's in the classroom, relevant connections, absolutely. So those are all, it's really good to keep kind of track. And then what do they need to learn? There's all kinds of things. They need to learn that vision, but they also need to learn why that vision isn't in place or isn't taken for granted in this person's life as their own. And they often need some real strategies, things that they have worked before in their own lives, for example, might need to be broken down or done from another angle, or, started over again. So they really need some help with planning and design. Families have been around since the get-go. They've figured out some things that just, aren't going to work, or areas you don't want to get into. So, for example, if it's a good life in community, you might be trying to avoid, kind of thinking about a group home as a home model for the future, right? And so, with that enthusiasm, people might say, oh, this sounds really good, or there's a yoga class for people with disabilities that sounds wonderful. So they need to learn about some critical thinking about the choices you make now, which are the ones that are on the path toward that vision, and which are just the typical ways that society sees and offers things to people with disabilities. I'm kind of plowing through this. There's a few other places for us to stop, but there's just some practical things that I get so excited about that I want to share with people. So just making sure that you've got enough to kind of get going when you get out of here. So I'm going to talk about a number of strategies now. So powerful ways for that team to work together, and learning these ideas together is really a good way to kind of work on communication, to make sure when something happens that's unexpected, or something isn't working out, it's rarely one person's fault. There's some communication difficulties, and the best thing you can do is just learn together. This is just to say there's a lot of strategies I'm not going to be able to get to, except just maybe with a word or two, and a few that I'm going to spend a bit more time on. People who know me well will not be surprised that one of the strategies I do want to spend some time on, although I'm going to focus in on some pieces, is this little strategy. It's a planning and design implementation strategy. It's really saying we've got kind of limited time, limited resources, a young person or a person who's really keen to get on with their life. How do we not waste their time? How do we make sure that we're strategizing, building situations in which roles, relationship, and places of belonging are more likely to occur? After years and years and years of working with families, working with people with disabilities themselves, this is what this little strategy that I call building a context for a relationship, it just never fails me. And partly because it's hugely based on some of the ideas of social role valorization, which has been around a lot longer and a lot more rigorously than this idea. So it's got some good underpinnings, I would say. So for people who know this, you can just test yourself to see if I've forgotten anything. And for people for whom this is new, this will be far too quick. I just want to make mention that there is a workshop by this name that I did this past summer, my summer, your winter, I think, with Imagine More. So there might be some possibility to recoup that for people who want it. And I also, there's a couple of books. The second one is, let's see if I can get that in the camera. We Come Bearing Gifts is the first book. The second one is Our Presence Has Roots. This second book, which we can maybe get someone to pop into the chat, is available on Amazon. But the fourth, fifth, and sixth chapters give lots more explanation around this concept. So forgive me for being brief. I could do this in 8 hours quite fully. So we'll see where this goes. The idea really is that because we can't create relationship, we can only build situations where relationship is more likely to occur. And what we found out by building these kinds of situations, by paying attention to 5 elements, other good things also evolve. People have identity, they have places to go where they're welcomed, they're able to give contributions that people welcome and are looking for. And the opportunity there is that some relationships of various degrees might arise. So really, this is saying, starting with the interests of the person with the little gold star, and it always starts with the person, and what we can figure out are the interests of the person. More and more, when we go through this strategy, I think the better you have a sense of the person, not just because someone says, oh, she's interested in nature, because she's always been interested in nature, but what is it about nature, and what in particular might you think about? That is like the little kernel that you get to nurture throughout. So really making sure it's the interest of the person, not of the paid supporter, not of mom and dad, not of older sister, but really it's something that the person is interested in. Secondly, we end up looking for places in community where other people have interest. And it's one of those brainstorms. You don't try to limit it by anything except that we're not looking for places where people with disabilities congregate, even in 50% numbers, reverse congregated groups or semi-integrated kind of groups. We're looking for real places in community where other people who don't have a disability, who hold the same interest, kind of gather, get together, show their interest. And we're particularly looking for places, which is the next little bubble to the right, where the person can be present on a frequent basis, because it's seeing and being with people time after time after time that provides a larger platform, a larger possibility of relationship developing, of people actually knowing each other. And so that's needed at both ends. Both parties need to check each other out. Fourthly, people have to come into those places in community on a regular basis where they have a genuine interest, and they need to have a role to play where they are more than just the spectator observer walking through. So we have lots of people walking through museums and libraries and festivals, just walking through and saying, I was there, I didn't get any friends. And what happens is we forget this element of role, and we're going to spend a few minutes on that. So let me just say that role, an engaging role where someone is actually making a wanted contribution, is the power of this model. And then fifthly, the thing that happens all too often is we design situations that are totally dependent on just the support person being there and the person, and therefore um, there's no third or fourth party that could even get to know the people. And so these are things that we have to keep in mind all of the time. And so, I say things like, going for long drives, walking the malls, or relaxing at home are fine for parts of your week. But the part where you got your very best support person and want to put your all into a carefully honed kind of design isn't the place where you're going to do that. There's no opportunity for people even to remotely touch you in those scenarios. Okay. Let me just do the same thing with a little bit of an illustration. Tiffany Daw is an artist of growing repute, I think, in Durham region. A friend of mine now. I was in paid employment with her family group for many, many years, and I didn't have claim to that word friend, but I think I've shown my time and worth in the 8 years since, so we are good friends. But there was a time in her life in her early 20s where we were trying to decide who was she going to be, how was she going to make her mark on her community, how was she going to make contributions in her neighborhood and beyond. We tried many things. One of the things, someone noticed that she was interested in color. She was noticing kind of small things that caught her attention. And so we did a few different things, but spent a lot of time exploring whether or not she had the heart and soul of an artist, or she would be simply a craftsperson was the other. But it was art she was actually drawn to. So on the side there, you see that the artist was the main role. So once we knew her great interest in who she could be, we asked ourselves, where are the people in Durham region who are into art? Who are they? What are their roles? What are they doing with their time? And we had pages and pages of results. We're about 20 years into the development of this role, and it's still new and fresh things evolving all of the time. So some of the smaller roles, which are kind of sub roles to the large art role, she over the years has become an art student of different teachers, different groups. She's a painting group member of 8 or 9 people get together once a week and paint together at a local art gallery. She's an art card seller, promoter, creator, actually. She's a gallery volunteer at a different gallery. She's an art guild member because artists join art guilds and someone's got to do the work. She's an art exhibitor, and she's been a finalist in several art competitions. There are other roles as well. I just ran out of space, but and so this is that theory, that framework, building a context for a relationship. We've gone with something that she was interested in. We explored it thoroughly. We figured out where are the other people in Durham region who have this interest. What are they doing with their time? What roles do they hold? Which of those are available to Tiffany? Can we get her to on a frequent and regular basis? Do we think she might really enjoy the way they interact and be together? And year after year after year, we try out different things, and some things hold forever. So the painting group, she's been a member of that for probably 10 years. The art guild, she's probably been a member for 20 years, right? So layers and layers, and some things she's just trying for a year or so. We did some trying to get her art into fabric. She was so bored by that process. We had to let it drop. So not every idea is a good one, but we had lots to work with. So this is this idea, the building a context for a relationship in action around a real life. So thanks, Tiffany, for being my muse. Out of that concept, there's 5 different elements, and one is role. And there's 4 big ideas around role that I want to leave you with that are pretty important. The first one is we need to think in roles rather than activities. Most of the time, we go around trying to fill people's time with meaningful activities. But when we talk in role brings with it purpose, identity, links with other people, routine, responsibilities, chances for contribution. These are the things that we're looking for people's lives. So it's much more powerful to think in roles rather than activities. Let me give you another way to see this. So when Tiffany at the very beginning was simply painting, it was an activity that filled a Tuesday afternoon. And our question, our everyday question is, what would she do with her? We went around looking for other activities that she might like to do or need to do, her shopping, her banking, that kind of thing. When we started to think in terms of role, what we were saying is, if Tiffany's an artist, what are the activities or sub roles connected to that role of artist? So who is she going to be, and how will she make a contribution? And that led us to this was her week at a glance, simply around her role as an artist at one point. And you can see all of the different things that she would do in a week that would fill out her week and help affirm her identity and deepen her identity as an artist, brought her in contact with a lot of people, some people time after time after time, gave her reasons to get up in the morning, work that she had to get done, some commitments that she made over time. So life was a lot more like yours and mine. And what that drew us to understand is that we could think for people, help them think about holding 3 to 5 roles in their life instead of 35 to 40 activities over the course of the week, right? It was way less exhausting, way more meaningful, and really helped Tiffany to affirm her place in her neighborhood and in her community. And so thinking in role is very, very powerful. The second idea related to this is we need to help people learn this skill. If someone's interested in something and we need to really figure out what those interests are, spend some good time at it, we need to move to role thinking. And we do that by this question of who could she be? So instead of asking, what can she do? What can she do to fill her time? If we ask, who could she be? It is so much more powerful. So here, we're going to take a few jabs at this. So I want you to think about an outdoor music festival. Now we're coming up to, almost winter here in Toronto, Canada. But you are coming up to summer, so an outdoor music festival. I don't know what your COVID numbers are like, but that has been in your experience, I'm sure. Can people just put into their ideas tab, what are roles at an outdoor music festival? Close your eyes, remember the last festival you were at. Who are all the people other than the spectators, and what are they doing? What's the role that they carry, right? So roles are nouns. They're words that he is a, he is the, whatever. And they, that's how we help identify what we're talking about. So if people could write that and just see, at times people get super creative around this. The security person is one. And sometimes there's little things that catch people, like, my son likes to feel important in a crowd. Well, the security people wear vests, sometimes carry a walkie-talkie. So that might really fit someone's kind of side interests. A check-in person, giving out tickets. These days they put those colorful wristbands on people, which are kind of cool to put on. Someone always needs to cut off the long dangling tab. Can be a performer, ticket scanner, bartender, sharing a love for all dancers. And you might then be the assistant to the stage that has the dancers, right? You could be the roadie in particular for a stage that looks after that. You could be an information booth volunteer. If you just think of the booths alone, there's food vendors, there's first aid officers. There's the one I go to, there's always a fire truck there for some reason. And so they have people around kind of exploring as a fire truck. So they have firefighters there, but they have other volunteers who escort people around the fire truck. They might hand out pamphlets and information. There's usually information booths, as this person has said, of every kind. And, often the people there simply are handing out pamphlets, information. They can sit easily with another person by their side and be very, very involved in that kind of thing. And so where at one point we might have said, oh, the music festival, well, he's not interested in music. That's actually not why you're going to think about all of the roles at the music festival. You're going to kind of let that free, and you would be surprised at, somebody who loves cars. They might be part of the parking brigade, handing out the stickers that people put on their car, or having a flag and waving people through, or standing by someone at night and having a light and making sure people get out safely. There are people who could care a whit about music and get really excited about those roles. Drink seller is one. Food vendor. Oh, you guys are great. I'm expecting Anne to collect these for all of us, and then we can kind of put them together. And this is a great exercise for your team to take it could be a walkathon event. It could be a large arts event, music event, environmental event, and get people to really, really brainstorm what are the roles that are there, and then check it out, right? You get to go and figure that out. And don't forget, there's the whole organizing group, and the organizers are the people who aren't only there for the 3-day event, but do this year round. So anyways, that's just some good exercise to kind of do that. And then you want, also people to really get this difference shifting from interests into roles. So if he's interested in books, he could be a librarian, a reader, a collector, a bookmaker. If he's interested in gardening, et cetera, et cetera. And you could say, if someone's interested in books and he could be a collector, that immediately fills way more time than you might imagine just being interested in books. So a book collector might be looking on the net and at stores for titles, might be buying for other collectors, might be looking for reviews, might be writing reviews in terms of a book collecting. So our thinking and role just helps us explode with ideas, and we need to help team members learn to do that. So you might have some ideas there. This is just one that a group did. This is a very small family group, and somebody was interested in books. So we said, if he's interested in books, where are the people who are also interested in books in our area, and what kind of roles could people be in while they're showing their interest in books? So we had another way of drawing out the same information. Again, really fun to do. And this could be one where you might just bring in the sister of your son with a disability. Might bring in her and a couple of her friends to do some brainstorming around particularly work or young people's interests, young people's music, that kind of thing, and just make it a fun kind of time. Another big idea is, at the heart of role is contribution. So I see role as this really powerhouse, the powerful engine of our powerhouse team. And understanding it gives people such richness. So the heart of role is contribution. And if you want to deepen someone's role, you just imagine, what could they be contributing? So don't stand back and wait to be asked. Think about this. I've got here, these are contributions of being. These are the softer ones. These are the gifts that people bring to people's lives. But the other more concrete contributions that people have is, often people have time. They have money in the sense that they have time to gather money or fundraise in some ways and figure that out. They often have expertise. Lots of people have such narrow, deep interests that they have statistics off the top of their head that people just really, really appreciate and can use in various ways. Some people are really, really patient about things. So there's all kinds of contributions that people can make. And then there's all of the hospitality contributions, like, loving to bake for people and make people a cup of coffee or bring people a cup of coffee. And these are all ways that we can really deepen role. And I'm going to show you how this is done quite easily. Around the fourth big idea, and that is, there is a lot of power in small familiar roles. The roles of family member, neighbor, and friend are roles that we know really, really well. We don't have to research or anything. We know what is a good family member, and we can stretch that a little bit. Let me just tell you a little story in this vein. This is a man named Brent. And Brent, sitting around, they kind of thought, he is a member of this family, so he has a family member role, but actually he doesn't act like any of the other adult family members in our in our family. He doesn't help out in any kind of way. And so they quickly decided that because Brent had been going shopping for years with his dad, loved pushing the cart, choosing the items, that he would begin to be the family grocery shopper. And he did that. He loved it. Dad was particularly pleased. He did it with a little bit of paid support. So he really took it on for the family. And when he was doing that, during that time, his grandmother fell and broke her hip. And the family gathered together and they asked Brett if he would be the shopper for grandma. And Brett's mom was kind of teary-eyed and said it's the first time in 26 years anyone in the family thought Brett had anything to offer. And so he started shopping for his grandmother. And while he was at her building one day, this woman here said, boy, I wish someone would do my shopping. And so for a little pay now, he also does her shopping. And so it's really taking the idea of what can you do with the family? How can he make a contribution to his family? I'm looking at the time. I think that we're going to run short of time. We're not going to do, this is a great exercise in the family. Who could she be? Spend some time at that. She could be the meal planner, the family photographer. You can do the same thing for in her neighborhood. Who could she be? And in the community is a bigger question, is what she's interested in. And so the role really is the engine of this powerhouse strategy, but I am going to get to others. People say, well, what about during COVID? During COVID is when Callie started her Miss Callie's Fur Baby Treats, and she started a little dog biscuit making company because she's allergic to dogs but adores them. So she's got this safe distance from dogs and contributes in this way. So there's a lot longer story of everything else she was doing during COVID, but there's nothing stopping people to be super creative during this time. The number of kind of small neighborhood businesses and contributions that we figured out during this time has been really quite wonderful. I did want to talk about this really influential strategy when you're thinking about the part of building a context for relationship. That's where the people, where are the people pulled in, and how can you make sure that relationship is part of your strategy? And this is the support triangle, and it simply says you challenge your support team members, or even you as a family member. How do you stretch the time when a third person is involved in your conversation, in your walk around the block, in your drive to the grocery store, in your chat at the turnstile at the library? How do you bring people in, and how do you think of ways of keeping them there so that they want to be there? You don't want to trap people. You want to entice them. You want them to enter into the conversation, be a part of something. And it's really helpful for support people to understand they already know the person really well. Most of their support in these situations, they've already designed the rest of the situation. For this part, they're supporting the third person, the new person who doesn't know the other person in their communication. And we need to support that again and again. And around all of this support relationship, I just want to remind people this takes an awful lot of time. Sometimes good things are happening, fairly good things from the start, better things after a year. You should wait and see what happens after 3 years. Wonderful, wonderful, deep things happen. All right. I've got just a few more things I need to. This is just reminding that we really need to have some strategies to get to make sure that the whole team gets to talk about, are we making progress? And again, you can look at this slide deck later on and get the details. This one's really powerful, and it says, is this person becoming someone in their life? And you can pick any of those life areas. Are they present and welcome in typical family and neighborhood and community spaces and roles? Are they doing things in typical ways that embrace the areas that we think are important? Are they contributing? Is there some mutual friendship? And you can just go down and say, how are we doing? How are we doing? Another one is 5 essential design questions, particularly good when you've just building a context situation and you want to figure out, is it a good place? Should we continue? Are there problems here? And the first question is one of the most important. Is this really a wonderful thing, or is it just kind of pretend and we're just making it happen, or it's good enough for him right? That's a good enough home. That job will be okay. He's not very demanding. Those are red flags right from the start. And what you want to be doing is helping to identify red flags. See, here's 3 for me. Special library times for people with sensory issues who want quiet. And I'm thinking, well, I thought the library was already the quietest place in the neighborhood, right? A petting zoo that was set up, typically it's for community. The one that I discovered was actually a day program that people actually had to pay to work there. When things are weird, Michael Kendrick says, don't do something weird when something ordinary will do. And it's one of my favorite sayings. And then I'm racing to get to at least saying a few words about guiding the team. Just some thoughts on really trying to keep clear, what does the supporter need right now? Is it a reminder of the vision? Is it a little bit more time? Is it that they think they've got the skill, but they don't, and it needs to be broken down a little bit more? Is it basic information that they're missing? Is it a part of the vision? Are they talking too much? Do they need to start listening? Do they need to be more reflecting and use a journal or something like that? And that leads to kind of some induction ideas. Just be firm on the things that are going to matter, that they're on time, that they're reliable, that they're well groomed, and that their language and tone and respect is in line with what the vision calls for. Don't over professionalize the role. You don't need direct support professionals. You need real people who know how community works and how to relate to people. So set them up as a learner, really stroke that part of their personality. Keep a certain formality. You're often working out of the family home. They might be thinking, well, this isn't an office. I can dress however I want. Doesn't matter if I'm late, mom and dad are around. You want to just keep that little distance and edge. Discuss the role of bridge early, and then give them some other positive kind of roles instead of thinking that they're staff or paid support or whatever. Provide them with some good reading. I'm sure Imagine More has lists and lists of that kind of stuff. And then really think about their future training and give them opportunities. The whole team needs an opportunity for critical thinking. Take a program that you think is outrageously, segregated and not on your path at all, and get people to articulate why that isn't going to meet the requirements that you all have for a good life for this person. That kind of thinking is really important. This is just saying, put your vision in writing. It's really, really useful. And if you have lines that you don't want to cross, so within my organization, we say to people, if you want to talk about group living, group leisure events, day programs, that kind of thing, we'll be happy to help you get to know another organization. We're about one person at a time in real community together with families. Those are lines we don't cross, and people love that clarity. And I just wanted to get to just really important for people to know you're always a role model. Every person in the family is constantly, including on the team, is putting ideas into the minds of other people. Let's be careful with our language, how we appear, how we dress, how we talk to people, how we talk about people. We are either influencing people to think that this is an ordinary person who doesn't talk like I do, but has lots in common with me, or someone weird and different that actually has nothing to do with me in my life, right? We're hugely influential in that. I'm just going to skip. This is just an idea of using your team to think about a metaphor. A metaphor is a really powerful way to think about your role as well. But the last idea, boy, I'm going down, I'm giving you much question time here. This is a hugely important question at the very beginning of the team's relationship, is to say to the paid people, when I leave, what am I leaving behind? I want you to ask. If you become the friend of the person, and when you become so essential because you solve everything, you do everything, you're there, instead of leaving behind bridges and connections and the scaffolding so that another support person can come on board and say, oh, this relationship is at this part, I can just help that along a little bit. So then it's all about the person that you're supporting and not you as a supporter. and helping people to realize right up front that likely they are going to leave, and likely they may not be a friend in the future. So let's, if the happy day happens and those things aren't true, so be it. But based on experience and based on the gaps and holes that are left in people's hearts when people make promises they can't keep, let's work under this assumption. You can still be friendly, caring, loving, and more importantly, you can be a bridge that leaves something behind when you need to be on your way. That's a whole lot of information, far, far too fast. The thing that I missed out entirely is this whole idea of metaphor. And actually, it's really great for your team to take a breath and do something more creative from time to time. So the power of a good metaphor, a metaphor is I am like, right? And so this is one that I did at one point in time. I was thinking about my direct support role at the time. And I said, I'm like the wind beneath your wings, in that, I felt that I was invisible, but pretty basic and elemental, especially in the first stages of the role that a person was taking on, that I was incredibly sensitive. I had to be very nuanced around when I'd be there, when I needed to pull back, and I needed to be efficient. I only had the time that she was in this place for me to do that. I needed to seek balance between being present and being far enough away so that a relationship could develop without me. I needed to keep lots of things in mind at the same time. And then at the same time, that would be transforming. So I just thought that's the wind beneath the wings of a bird in flight was my kind of imagery around that. But when I've done this with other teams, there's beautiful imagery around a chef concocting a perfect soup and trying to figure out what are the ingredients and making sure the person themselves also got to taste and add in. And another group came up with, we're like the orchestra conductor or a tour guide. Someone said, I'm really helping both parties to understand a world that the other doesn't quite understand fully. So there's lots of power in that kind of thinking in terms of metaphor. I think I'll take the rest in questions. Anne or Jan, I'm not sure who was. It's Jan.
Hi, it's me. That was wonderful, yeah. Janet. Thank you so much. And just so many practical tips that you've offered people to just sort of mull over and think about and consider. And speaking from experience with where our son has a few staff members, I know that that's going to be really informative for them to sort of look at their role and reflect on what they can do better and celebrate what they're doing well. So thank you. Mm-hmm. I also just want to let people know that Janet was talking about Klees Treats, a little business that she obviously got started through COVID. Well, the same has happened here. We've got a local young guy, Charlie Herbert, who started Herbert's Healthy Treats, and we've got that in our exhibitors page on this. So go and check it out and see whether you can purchase some dog or horse treats. So he's doing a fabulous job. So people have some good ideas. Okay, so we've got some questions here, Janet. One in particular is, do you have suggestions for getting a family member involved, such as discovering their interests, when vocalizing these is really difficult for the person?
Oh, yeah. We just need to pay a lot more attention to people. I have a slide there that with all the colorful arrows on it. We want to notice what they're drawn to, what they spend time looking at, what they touch, who they really shine when they're in the presence of. And then when we really understand what they're looking like, when they're kind of in their element, we need to try out different things. And people say, like what? Well, I would look first and foremost to age peers. It doesn't matter if you're 20, 40, or 60. What are other 20, 40, or 60-year-old in this community excited about? And is it music, or is it an old Fogies concert, or and just go. And for lots of people, the first time of going is a little bit overwhelming to the senses. If people haven't been there, they don't know what to expect. So when I go to a concert, I've gone to many concerts, I kind of know what to expect. If this is my first experience of doing something, you might need to do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times for people to get the gist and feel comfortable enough to really become themselves in that venue. So that we just need to pay attention, expose people, and go on little things. I was working with a team at one point who the young guy that they were involved with, the only thing that they could say that he really liked, he seemed to be at his element when he had the fan in his bedroom blowing on his face. And that's what he liked. And so we just went, where do you get to be with the wind in your face? And they went off exploring, from amusement parks to cars with open windows to, and the thing he enjoyed the most was one of those, I don't know, racing tracks where you're in a little cart and and we think he liked the feel. He's a man who is visually impaired, so he liked the feel of the rumble on the road and the wind in his hair and being out and about. And there were people, but not a huge crowd. We think he could understand them separately. And so when we began to know the interests, then we could jump, who could he be at this place? Right? What are the possibilities? So there's no little edge that's too small to try to explore more widely. And, it's a real ball often for support people to kind of be the people reporting in on how things are going and being part of that excitement.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And I think so often I've heard where people suggest ideas to the person, and the safe answer is no, especially if they've got no idea what that might look like for them or how they can contribute or be involved. So, don't always maybe help them understand what that might look like, how they can get involved, and that you're going to be there with them.
Yeah, and that they don't always today we're going to try out, when we get there, if you don't like it after 15 minutes, or, if it's not good, if we don't like it, if the two of us don't like it, we're not going to stay, but we're going to check it out. Right. And then think about what helps the person to stay a little longer. And is it bringing a snack along with you? Is it making sure that there's a coffee bar there? So when the person gets restless, you go for, a break of some kind. How do you increase the time so the person can get more used to things?
Yeah, so it's not asking the question, it's suggesting this is what we're doing. So, that's really nice.
Yeah. And that's where you get to also work on that bond that you've built, the trust bond with the supporter. So they're not the friend, but they certainly are the trusting, caring, safe person. So if we're saying we're doing that together and the person otherwise has a lot of choice in their life, they probably won't even notice and say, oh, that sounds kind of cool, right? Let's go and do it. So,
yeah, that's right. Can you give us an example of how a support worker has successfully become the bridge to a person in their journey? This is with the hope to share with a support worker.
Yeah,
so a bit of a story.
So let me just take one of the Tiffany stories, because I talked a little bit about her and people would be familiar if she's an artist. So this was only maybe 4 or 5 years ago, which in Tiffany time is short, right? Because these things have happened over now decades. But 4 or 5 years ago, she wanted just exposure to different art, different people. And we noticed they were looking for volunteers at a classier kind of art gallery in the area than she goes to right now. For her painting group. And so they were looking for volunteers of various kinds. And so she tried out some different things. And while she was kind of doing a pretty mundane task, but kind of, like the people she was in the office with, there was a young curator there who was about Tiffany's age and, had nothing to do with Tiffany, no reason to be in the room. But she kept finding reasons to be in the room. And the smart supporter thought, this this person's kind of interested in Tiffany. And so she kind of drew her in and said, so what's your job here? What's your role? And she says, oh, I'm a curator. And she says, what does that mean? Right. And so they talked about how she thought about exhibits and brought them together and everything like that. And we said, well, how do you come up with your topics and themes and ideas? And they talked then. The curator, because she was a curious young person, wanted to know about Tiffany and found out she was an artist. And, so Tiffany showed her some of her art and brought in some of her art. And then that got them to talking about the fact that they're always looking for a new angle to curate things. And they had never before had a curator with a disability. And they're talking now about co-curating, right? And so Carla is a person that she's in Tiffany's art world. So she's not part of her circle. She's part of her art friends. She gathers together for art purposes, and they do some specific things together, but really nicely built with this. And I like to think that in the fullness of time, Carla won't remember for a moment the name of that supporter, and only that she got to know Tiffany. And that, I think, is, bridges, us as bridges, we need to be really, really happy with success without accolades of that kind.
Yeah. And actually probably what might help this person understand with their question around what does BCR stand for, and for in a BCR match. So obviously they haven't seen that previous webinar of yours, which we will make available for people after the conference.
So that's just that building a context for a relationship. That's that busy red slide that I showed. And you're probably looking at the 5 essential design questions and saying, is it a BCR match? And that was code for people who knew those 5 elements and say, yeah, we've gone down them. So thanks for asking. Yeah. That's great.
Okay, where do you recommend finding good support workers? Start with interests, ? And do you find attitude is important, and then you can train them in support skills?
Yeah, okay. So lots bundled up there. Partly I've said we get some raw materials, but we make people rather than find a whole lot of people. Some people come with a better kind of personality match than others, but I absolutely go for the personality, the attitude, the openness, and that's a person who can learn, right? If someone comes on and they're really good at they have a resume that's really tight around doing lots of support work in the past, and they're good at scheduling, and they're good at all these other things. I just wonder, do they have the flexibility to do the learning that says, out of what you used to do, we don't actually use this stuff, we use this stuff, right? And so often I've had people say, oh, I've got this great planning tool, and it's all written out, we just have to fill in the blanks and it'll give us the answer. Okay, that's not a person that is going to fit with this kind of an approach. So and I think there was another piece to that, Jan, was there?
I guess they were asking, to actually find a good support worker, do you sort of start with the interest? So that could be a good, particularly focused on one role.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think there's 2 answers. If you're trying to specifically follow up with a clear interest that someone has, that's quite for Tiffany, we found a painting mentor that was paid for a while for her to explore her art with. So obviously we wanted someone who actually was an artist, a painter. But in general, sometimes having someone who's more of a generalist makes the bridging even easier, right? Because people, you have to go out and search for that third person. So you've automatically got the third person. And sometimes when people have a very, very specific interest, but this is a person who needs, throughout the day, a wider range of support from personal care or some medical kinds of things. Not everyone's got the mindset to do that. So you might not find kind of a musician type. So I think I use the very specific interests for, very specific reasons and smaller time slots usually. But people who provide, helping a person to be a good neighbor and helping person to be, the manager of their home in those longer hours and more kind of graceful living kinds of things, to be more generic.
Yeah, and it could be around, like a lot of people mention the importance of having friends. So that person's role could be helping them connect if that's difficult for them to do. Yeah. We've got a question here. Is it so bad if my kids end up gravitating towards other autistic people? They just tend to join the same group's activities due to common interests.
Right. I think the question is, what's the interest, right? And so first of all, making sure, so if the interest is art or music or movies, many people have that interest. What people's comfort level is, what their experience is, they might be gravitating to things that they know and are comfortable with, and they haven't got the support or confidence developed to try new things. So it's not saying that people will never do that, but in a world where you feel welcome in all kinds of places, and we can help with that welcome. Typically, people would have a wider range of things they choose from, particularly if people have specific interests. They really want to be around people who will stretch them, not accommodate the way they are right now alone, right? You really want people who press you to be the best that you can be and try something new. And then not to forget that as family members and friends of the person, you want them to have a few more people in their life who can play that safeguarding role, people who understand society, who can step into situations, speak up for people and keep them safe. So you've got some really logical reasons to expand that as well. So, and the other thing I always say is I'm not into taking away from people's lives, but adding to. So you don't prevent that stuff from happening. It's just you try to add to that. And then people do have real choices. It's just that you really want to support those new choices super, super well and for a long, long time.
Yeah, it's more than just trying it once.
Yeah.
Look, Janet, that was really wonderful. Thank you so much. And we've had lots of comments, probably more so than questions, because their minds are full, I think, with the ideas and strategies that you've actually provided. So thank you so much.